Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma Creagh, and in this episode I chat with writer-director Damian McCarthy about his atmospheric horror Oddity, which is in cinemas on the 30th of August. So have a listen back to the trailer here.
Could you open the door?
What do you want?
You're in trouble.
What?
Could you just open the door? I am telling you that there is someone in there with you. Why do you want it?
He took my sister's life. I want to see what was going through his mind. You said I should visit on Danny's anniversary.
The thought of another patient showing up at the front door here.
Would you allow them in?
Of course not.
My sister would never allow a strange man into her home in the middle of the night.
She's saying some weird things to me, Dad.
She's clearly not well.
Do you mind staying out here alone at night?
I'm just telling you what I saw.
Danny's ghost. My dead wife is not haunting this house.
What is this?
Put them back! This is not real. As I've always believed.
Okay, so this was a really engaging, brilliant world built up. The characters are so well drawn. The lore of the film is fantastic, and it's just a really engaging watch in terms of the visual elements of it, the storytelling. Things are set up very early on, but it doesn't even matter if you know. Actually, it's the journey and the little the way that it's revealed is actually such a brilliant watch. I enjoyed it so much.
Great, thank you. It's great to hear.
And it's just nice to see. I think films like this, it doesn't feel like what maybe 5 years ago we would have described as an Irish film, but yet it is very Irish. Like there's so much in terms of houses and accents and characters that we all know in there. But I mean, it's again just such a standalone, solid piece of filmmaking.
Well, that's been the great thing about it, because I mean, you never know if it's going to travel. Do you know what I mean? Like I never thought it would travel the way it has. Like we went to South by Southwest with the film. We went to BIFAN in South Korea. And I mean, I always felt that it was very Irish. I mean, obviously it's a nearly all Irish cast, crew. It's filmed in West Cork. And, you know, you just know, you don't know if these things will travel, because I had spoken to certain producers before that are based in the States, and they'd said that like just the audience there just likes to hear their own accent, no matter where it is in the country. But I think the Australian film Talk to Me kind of did away with that theory, because it's an all Australian cast, and I mean the film traveled amazingly around the world. So yeah, so I think that theory is gone out the window somewhat. You know, the fact that we made this small Irish film and it's been all over the world now, which is great.
The world is so interesting. It's so sort of moody, but like even though it's dark, it's not weighty dark. Like there's like a fun campy element to it too, even though it wouldn't be B-movie or anything like that. Like I think that's the thing where it's so enjoyable, because there is that lightness to it, so you're completely entertained. So talk to me about like writing this.
Yeah,
I know you've done, your shorts have been ridiculously well received, and in terms of coming up with this particular story, what was it based on? The world, the lore, the artifacts. Like it was just so fun. It's like something out of those antique shop, those like old after school kind of horrors that you used to watch as well, but with that new edge to it.
Totally, yeah. I mean, I guess it comes from a lot of those old horror tropes that I really like. You know, that the blind psychic, the haunted items, the antique shop with all this history behind the items inside the shop.
Carolyn Bracken is a gorgeous, blind psychic.
Oh
as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
Even when we first see her inside in that antique shop, she looks like a little delicate ballerina inside in a music box. I mean, it looks like, you know, that she belongs in that world. I think it was just a big mix of all these different types of horrors I already loved. There's a little bit of a slasher, and there's a little bit of a ghost story. There's kind of a whodunit, and it was just taking a lifelong love of all those different subgenres of horror and just seeing if I could bring them together in a way that there's just a film then that's just packed with a lot of different types of scares. So maybe if you're not really a big fan of slasher films, if they've never really scare you, it doesn't matter because there's plenty of ghosts in the film to scare you. And if ghosts don't scare you, then there's lots of psychological terror in it. So I was just trying to tick a lot of boxes. And what you say about the film feeling kind of light, or that there's kind of like that was very much intentional. Like I'd never, even though I am a horror filmmaker, I never really set out to kind of disturb anybody or kind of disgust or, if the script calls for it, fine. But I kind of like horror films where you can come away from it feeling more in a good mood, that it's been a bit of an escapism and it's been exciting watching it. But when it's over, it's like not with you for days in a bad way. So like if you think of like a very, I don't have to name anything, but if you think of a very heavy horror film you've seen that was brilliant, but maybe quite downbeat and a little bit depressing. And I've seen films like this where it's like going, that's an amazing film, brilliantly made. It's an excellent horror film. I'll never watch it again because it's just so heavy, for certain types of things I've seen. I kind of think that spoils it a little bit. I'd much rather have something that's scary while you're watching it. And hopefully, it'll stay with you when you're going to bed that night. But ultimately, you're trying to make something that is kind of a B movie and is a bit just, it's an entertaining hour and a half without being without taking itself too seriously and having a bit of a comedic tone in it as well.
Yeah, and because it's so funny because like you do have that like spectrum, and then you have like that kind of like over the top campish that is quite sarcastic. Like American horror would kind of be like, oh well, like, but it's very kind of cutting in tone. But this is kind of like I know it's so, but there's kind of like a warmness. Like, oh, you're really on side with Carolyn. I like as the antagonist. I think as well the characters are so well realized. Like the new girlfriend, I think is hilarious. I think that like
Yeah.
she's the funniest beat in there, and her
Yeah.
reaction to things.
Yeah, and very much with her even talking to Caroline Menton when we cast her just about the role, it was like I mean there are archetypes in the film of there's kind of the the stuffy doctor who's very all about science and logic, and there's the creepy orderly, and there's the escaped mental patient, all this kind of these real characters that we're used to seeing. But it's trying to find a way to take all those characters and try to subvert them somewhat, and especially with that new girlfriend, the kind of bitchy character. And it was never the idea. And even talking to Caroline day one, I said, it's so easy, but it would be so easy just to make this character just this vapid kind of, oh, she's just going to be psycho fodder. She's going to get killed by the wooden man or whatever. But it was like, no, she's kind of the audience in some ways. Like, she thinks a lot of the stuff going around her is completely unreasonable. And she vocalizes all these things. She says it like she goes, "This is a bizarre present to bring somebody." Like they're gifted this horrifying wooden man, and she says it. She goes, "I think it's a bizarre present to bring to somebody's house." It's just that kind of thing, which I think makes her more likable than from what that character would normally be in a thing. But a lot of that's down to Caroline Menton, just with her performance was brilliant.
Yeah, you do. I think that was one of the lines that I thought was the funniest. Like she's like, "Why would you bring this creepy wooden man to us?"
Yeah.
In terms of the lure of it, like the creepy wooden man and the ghost, where would you like building the world and the kind of rules of how it exists in this world? Where did he come from?
Well, I guess the original idea for it was that I think in one of the earlier scripts, she was going to bring along like a doll, like a small haunted doll. But I mean, that idea in horror films has just been done to death with everything from Annabelle to Chucky and Child's Play. So it doesn't make any sense that she'd bring along this. I think the audience would kind of roll their eyes and groan. Whereas if you brought something that's almost like the golem, like in Jewish in Jewish tales, where they bring along this clay golem that they bring to life to do their bidding or whatever it be. I thought, well, if you had a spin on that, where it's something quite imposing that's going to be brought to the house and it's going to sit there for the entire film, a little bit like a ticking bomb. You don't know when it's going to go off, and it's not doing anything, but it's just sat there and you're waiting for something to happen. I thought there'd be a bit of suspense in that and a bit of kind of maybe dark comedy as well. So that's kind of where the idea came from, is starting with what is she bringing to the house that she's going to use as her weapon of revenge that's going to slowly, we're going to slowly wait for this thing to do something. And I just thought something imposing, um, in that human form, but quite disturbing, would be a good idea. And then as for kind of how it works with the objects in his head and this kind of stuff, I don't really know. I think a lot of that you kind of hint at it, and it's fun then just to leave the audience to go, oh, clearly, like in the last week, she's been doing stuff off camera that we don't know. You got to kind of make up your own ideas then on how this thing works. I always love films that do that, that they don't explain every little bit.
And the haunted antique shop, would that play as a feature, like as something that you'd base future franchises on?
It's funny, I've been asked that, and I know some people have said to me like, "Oh, you should," because they said there's a lot of room to go back to her shop and to go through all those other objects. Now, a lot of the objects on the shelf are from previous short films or from other films that made that they're those things. I have this thing though where I kind of like I miss when films were like one and done. That the story's told and it's hard to get back into that world without some kind of coincidence or contrivance of the plot or something that's to go back. I don't know. I kind of find that when I'm writing now that I try to kill all the characters, just burn the bridge after I've crossed it in some ways, like just so there's no way back into it. I do think that there's stuff there that you could have done, but
Prequels. You've done
I know.
yeah.
Bring Carolyn back and send her on some other adventure. I think that the most I do is probably hint at the characters in other scripts, but I just think because there's so many, I have so many films and so many scripts that I want to make that I don't think I'd ever stay in one story too long. It's always nice to I would find it's always nice to keep just moving on to the next thing.
All I'm saying is Ireland is well overdue a supernatural detective story that I would watch, and I would totally watch her. So prequels.
Well, I think Carolyn would certainly do a good job of it for sure. Yeah.
Pair up with someone who's like, kind of like lovable, warm, and affable, and have them play off each other. I just watch the shit out of it and go to the villages and like, find artifacts. All I'm saying is I'd watch that. And
Maybe, okay. I'll think about it. Yeah.
Oh, but tell me about again, like in terms of you mentioned before, like this had a different draft, this had a different vehicle in terms of the monster to say. How many drafts did you do? Like how far along would this go before you got development funding? Because this is your first feature. I know you've written 3 at the moment.
So yeah. I had made one. So I'd made a lot of short films, and they had done well at the circuits and winning awards. And just for me, just educationally, just learning how to make films, which is the only way to do it, really. And I had made one feature film then called Caveat, which was micro budget movie. Like it was a no budget movie essentially. We kind of had enough to just to get the film shot, I guess. But it was very much written around things that I had access to, things that I could do myself, pulling in a lot of favors from family and friends. The really old, boring story of how a lot of filmmakers start. They don't have any contacts in the industry. They can't get any financing, so they just find a way to make it happen. But that film took years to make just because I was still working my day job. So I was editing it and sound designing it. And,
And what was your day job? Was it in the industry?
No, I was an electrician on working building sites. With my dad and my brother.
And that's like physical, like that's exhausting.
Oh, it's such a. I mean, a lot of my movies have confined dark spaces. That's probably from years of crawling around up in attics, dragging cables. It's a very, very different type of work now.
Yeah, if there's any sparks issues on your set, you'd be like, I'll go down and sort it out.
Oh yeah, well, I always have. Yeah, it's always there, which is good. So we'd made Caveat, and it came out. We finished the film and it went into festivals just as the pandemic came along. But the pandemic obviously shut down a lot of film festivals. So I kind of felt the film got lost a little bit. But it didn't really make much difference to me because it led to me getting my agents at UTA. And then that led to meeting producers, and which ultimately led to Oddity. So we didn't get any Screen Ireland support with the film. We didn't get any development funding, or they weren't involved at all. We applied, but they turned us down, unfortunately. But it was very much Shudder. It was Shudder that financed the film entirely, and were just great to work with because they had distributed my first film, Caveat, and it did well for them on the platform, and then that led into to Oddity. So yeah, We put together this amazing cast: Steve Wall, Gwilym Lee, Carolyn Bracken, Carla Menton, Jonathan French. Great cast of people, and all these HPs.
That's quite interesting. I might just ask a little bit more about that, about your agents. So do you like, what is that relationship like? Do you just go like, look, I have a bunch of ideas. These are the projects
Hmm.
that I really want to get off the ground. And they're like, oh, we can help you sell this, or, like help you pitch this to
Yeah.
people. Like what is the mechanics of that even like? Like I'm sure it's different for everybody, but even in terms of this.
I guess it is like just with me. I know that some people they have managers and they have a bigger team around them, but just because I have all of my scripts written, I know what I want to do for the next 20 or 30 years. They all every script gets a little bit more ambitious. It's going to need a little bit more of a budget to pull it off. So really, with my agents, when I finish a script, I send it to them. Let's say the case for Oddity, they had seen Caveat. That's why they took me on as a client. Um, and I sent them Oddity. I said, "This is what I want to do next." Obviously, they sent me scripts from other producers and studios, whatever that things they want to make. But I just like to direct films that I write myself. So I send them the script. They read it and they say, "Yeah, this is." If they like it, they'll be like, "Yeah, this is great." And then they basically, I guess it's their job to be in the mix and to know everybody, out in Hollywood or wherever it is that knows who's looking for a particular type of a project. So just with Oddity, they knew producers that they thought, yeah, this is something that they're looking for. It's a female-led revenge film. It wouldn't cost a whole lot to do. So I was put in touch with Laura Tunstall and Mette Marie Kongsved, or two producers who they'd done Get Duked and I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore with Elijah Wood, Come to Daddy. And they liked the script, and I hit it off with them. I thought they were great. And then through that, then they had worked with Katie Holly at Keeper Pictures. Katie had this amazing track record of producing films here in Ireland. They had made Come to Daddy together. So then that was my production team. So that's I think the kind of role of an agent in some ways, just to know people that I wouldn't, or maybe that a filmmaker, maybe I don't have. I mean, when I made my first feature film, I had no contacts at all in the film industry, not even in the Irish film industry, barely. So I think that's kind of what they do, is just open up doors for you a little bit and put you in touch with people that they think you'd work well together with, and that's kind of how it started, I guess.
Brilliant. God, that's great. And then what's the process like working with Shudder? Because again, like they're just like an impressive name in terms of horror and what they're
Yeah.
doing. And what is it like? Like, do they like are they on board from the script level? Are they involved with development to the next layer of drafts? Do they, I mean, presumably you have to fit in with a slate of projects for them.
You can do, yeah. Well, I mean, they had taken on my first film, Caveat, which was a micro budget, no budget movie, and that did well for them. I met them, I hit it off with them. We just got on well. We're all big horror fans, and it was true. Emily Gatto, who's a fantastic producer. She works at Shudder along with Sam Zimmerman, who'd be the head of Shudder there. And I just sent them the script. They said, like, well, Caveat was, they enjoyed Caveat. They said, well, what are you planning to do next? And I sent them the script for Oddity, and they just really liked it. They said, this is great. I don't even think they had many notes in it. They said that this just, I think they get involved later in the process. I think it's more up to, yourself and your producers to develop the script, or to get it up to a place where it's closer for funding, or maybe closer to the shooting script to actually go. So that's where they came in. They came in quite late. But they were still fantastic, very supportive, and they've got such great minds for, like the mechanics of horror, how to craft a scare, what's scary, and I mean especially Sam Zimmerman, he's just like this encyclopedic knowledge of horror films. I mean, I think I've seen a lot, but nothing compared to what Sam has seen. So he's a great test to see if your script is original. Like if there's stuff in here that hasn't been seen before, I think he'd have a great mind to flag it, quite quickly. So that got us into pre-production. We did apply to Screen Ireland for financing, but it wasn't for them. They turned it down, which was disappointing.
Oh. And what about completion or anything? Was there, do you know, even
No,
when it
it
gets to,
no, it just, I think once we got that initial rejection, that they just weren't in, they just didn't like the material or whatever it was.
okay,
That it was very much thanks to Shuddered In, that they, and I mean, we
yeah.
had more than half the budget. We had all of our cast and crew and everybody in place.
But the audience and the distribution, that's the thing where you're like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, this is on its way.
Yes, yeah, all in place. So yeah, it was very disheartening, but it all worked out fine because we had Shudder. They were fully behind the film. They could see that the film was going to they could see that the film was going to work. They had, they said that an audience will go see this. They were convinced that they could see the potential in it, I guess, which is great. That's the kind of people you need behind you when you're making a film. Everybody on the crew as well and the cast, you need people to go, yeah, this film is going to work when it's done. Like once we get this off the page and shoot it, this will be a pretty cool film.
It is, and it so is. The visuals, the mood of it, like it was just such an enjoyable watch, but like very, like I like that, like very refreshing as well. Tell me about, so something like this is so like there's so many elements of tension and pacing. There's effects, there's models, there's violence. Talk to me about even your process in pre-production and prepping all that in terms of even health and safety for like those kind of more actiony scenes. Does that take up a huge amount of time, and how do you maneuver that and create it?
Storyboarding for me is just absolutely everything, even any stunt work, what I did for this, and because I've done it for my short films, just because I never had any, and I did it for Caveat. You don't have any. I never had any financing to make a film, so I was made sure that I'm as prepared as I can possibly be, and I just think storyboarding is just the way to do that, and I think a lot of really big filmmakers like the Coen brothers and Denis Villeneuve and all these kind of guys, they storyboard everything in detail. Now, obviously, and Ridley Scott and these kind of guys, but when you arrive to the set, sometimes the storyboards, you come up with something better on the day, but it's just a really good way to have that. And I find it's a really good way to communicate with cast as well. So, and things like those action scenes you talked about, or so that would be stunt work. So I just gave the stunt team the storyboard. I said, these are my ideas to, here's ideally what I'd like to shoot. So you kind of work with them and safely tell me what's achievable, what's not, what do we have to look at again, and then you pick their brains on it and how to approach these things. Same with special effects. Here's what I'd like to shoot, but maybe they'll tell you, well, if you change it slightly to this angle, you'd get it. And you find these compromises and ways to collaborate.
In terms of pre-production, does anything kind of change in terms of script or story, or like like when you get to location or you're working with actors at that point, does anything shift for you? Is everything really fixed in place if it's so technical?
No, it sounds probably very locked down, everything, but I think the only reason that I storyboard and try to come as prepared as possible, because I think that the more prepared you are, it just makes you more flexible then, because then you go like, I know what'll work. So once you have that in your head, then you're allowed to listen to every single suggestion, because you know if it's going to help what you're trying to achieve. Whereas I think if you don't show up with any plan and somebody gives you a suggestion, in the moment it might sound fantastic, but then you realize, actually, if I do that though, it's gonna work against something that's coming later in the script, because you shoot all these things out of sequence, or it's going to undo something earlier. So it always stays very loose, even in the edit. I find that you're still working on the script in some ways, because you're dropping lines of dialogue, or maybe you're swapping scenes around. Like you thought that maybe this scene would be better to happen before this, but then it's just that the film changes once you watch it and you realize, oh no, the structure of this, some of these things need to get swapped around. And like me, I mean, you could have been looking at the script for 3 or 4 years and you just don't see these things until then you see the film, which is very strange, whatever happens. But yeah, it's a continuous changing thing all the time, through every prop that comes on and every actor you speak with. You're always just trying to stay open to good ideas and not miss any of them.
In terms of working with your cast, what's your process like there? Do you have like big long discussions? Do you do workshops? Do you like have them just arrive on the day and be surprised? What's your own preferred method there?
I think directing is such a weird thing, because I mean, you can become a really good writer, because I mean, I write every day and I'm always trying to just to get better at it and get things tighter and tighter, and try to keep your scenes to under 4 pages and all these kind of rules that you read of. With directing and working with actors, it's a tricky thing, because you get to do it like once every couple of years, if you're making feature films, I guess. I sit down with them before with the script. So once you have that initial conversation of like, what do you think of the part? Any big issues with it? Any major plot problems or things you don't like about the character. You just try to find all of them now.
That's very open and vulnerable in terms of,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
because it is a collaboration, but you wouldn't, not everyone who's a director would feel comfortable enough to admit that, which is lovely.
I know, but I just think because you're under so much, the clock is always ticking on when you're making the film. And I've been lucky because the two films I've made, actually making the films has been a really relaxed set. We finished on time, we finished a day ahead of schedule. Like again, everybody is there on the working towards the same goal, but you absolutely got to find that in conversations before anybody sets foot on set, because you can't be having long discussions about why would my character do this. It's like, you've read the script, we talked about this beforehand. You try to find those things beforehand. But what I find comes from those conversations is if somebody does have a different idea, it can be you'll get really good stuff out of that. So like I always think of Steve Wall, for example. So Steve plays this very creepy, menacing orderly. Now the way he was written, it's all the same dialogue, but the way he was written was very thuggish and very loud and like a real bully, and just this, not an instantly dislikable character. But then Steve had this whole idea that like, well, what if we brought him down? Or what if we made him very low key? Whatever's going on is very internal with him. He kind of looks up to Ted in a weird way. So is he kind of imitating in some ways? Ted is the doctor that he works for. And it was just, is way better. It was just a much weirder approach to the role. I never would have thought of it, but it was just, I loved it then. I mean, working with him, I mean, we kind of be laughing every time he did a take in a good way, in a kind of a nervous laughter way. So like going, that's so strange. That's such odd behavior from this guy, from his character, that it's exciting to watch then. But all of the actors had that. All the actors had that thing where it's like, well, it's written this way, but I kind of feel like you can write something, let's say 60% or 70%, but then it's very much up to the actor to fill in those blanks. Or I'm not an actor, I'm terrible in front of the camera. So it's up to, that's their talent. It's up to them then to find a way. I see what you've written. Now, what about this? Here's how we bring it to life. And same with Carolyn and Gwilym, and they all have these little ticks and interesting things that they did throughout the film, or things they introduced with the character. And again, that's all just being open to how a film changes as you're making it.
And that's quite interesting. In terms of like opening up the script for notes and thoughts, was there anything was there any feedback that made you kind of revise certain things or rethink certain things, or was it more about the nuance of that particular character?
I think it's more nuanced. It's just little things that they have, or maybe moments in a scene, or things they might say that once they not challenge you on it, but they go like, what's behind this line, or what's behind this piece of dialogue. And yeah, I mean, writing a script, and even with script notes and dealings with producers, the whole thing is it's a miracle any film gets made. Any, because I think that the whole idea of writing a script and trying to get it made, it's a constant challenge of people saying every single iota of a script is picked apart. And I think with certain actors, it can be that they can be very, very particular with every single line and why is it on the script. But luckily I wrote it, so I know, these characters have been in my head for a long time. So more often than not, I'll know what that line means, or what's behind it.
And when you're writing, I know this sounds weird, do you kind of go, okay, I want to plot this out, and then when you go to write them, sometimes they do different things? Like, has that ever happened, or would you be more like, no, plot, and we'll kind of shift it around?
So the way I would work, and every writer's different, is I try to keep, I don't write pages and pages. I plot everything. So I'd be very, very plot heavy. So I'd have I'd write down like my 3 acts. I'd write down those. I think that, not that I'm a big follower of rules with screenwriting, but I do like the Save the Cat book. I think there's something to that, and there's like 12 beats in that. And I think if you can hit those 10 or 12 beats, they are quite interesting. So even like if it's your opening act, your first act, second, your midpoint, I think is hugely important, into your third act, and then your finale. I think even those, whatever that is, 5 or 6 points, that if you can hit those, you're doing well. I try to keep them to a page and just very, very, almost in bullet points, break it down like that. And I'll try to always keep the script essentially, or just the plot layout to that, to those bullet points. Once that really feels like it's been locked and explored, and I can see where it's scary or where it's changing, I'll then start the script. But obviously writing the script, that's where you start finding all the surprises because they'll start talking or it sounds silly. I know other writers have spoken or filmmakers talk about that suddenly the character will say something, but you weren't expecting them to say it. But it does happen. And I think it happens for me again once I know where the story's going. I know where all the excuse me, I know where all the characters are trying to end up. That then you have that freedom then where you're just typing so fast that they do start talking and they start insulting each other, they start making jokes, or they'll suddenly do something that you weren't expecting. And then I love that. Then you do get that surprise. But that only works for me if I'm not thinking about plot. If I'm not thinking like, but what's going to happen next? But if I know this guy is going to die, or I know, this character is whatever's going to happen to them, I know where they're going. So I don't have to think about that now. But now I can just let them talk, and then they just start talking, which is, I know it might sound kind of silly, but it does seem to happen.
It sounds like you have such of a process in terms of, creating the world, like building these characters, like getting the kind of blueprints of the film on the page. Does like then when it goes to, okay, you have the script completely as almost like the translation of the initial thought that you've had, that kind of like planning it, prepping it, you translate it into the script, you have your script down, you've polished it as much as you can possibly do. Then do you find there's a thinking shift to then practically going, okay, how do we actually do this? Or like, what does this look like?
Yeah.
Or is it all part of, is there a shift in the way that you approach that? Or is it very much so, no, I'm trying to get as close to that original vision as I have? Because it's such a different process directing it to writing it and imagining it. Because like at that stage, it's like the biggest thing it could possibly be. But then the practicalities of, oh, actually, we only have this much money.
Totally, yeah. I had a great instructor in film school, Ed Katajeski. He died last year, but the Oddity is dedicated to him. But he used to always say to us, right? He goes, when you're writing the script, it sounds so basic, but you got your writer's hat on. When you're finished writing it, now forget about the script, put on your director's hat, pretend you haven't read the script before, and just start looking at how to visualize it. And it's very much a thing. I've been writing. I'm about to start work on my next film now, and I've been writing this thing. It's been a very difficult script to write for whatever. He's gone through so many rewrites. I've never written something that I've put so much work into. But the script is done now. It's gone out. We're good to go. So I'm now looking at it from the point of view of a director. I'm like, how do I visualize it? And it's just, and it can't just be the way my mind works. It must be a common thing, like the way you're saying. You just suddenly see it so differently because you go, well, what does this room look like? And I've been on the page in this room for 4 years, but now I'm not. It's like I actually have to shoot this. So how do I shoot? And what's the wallpaper? What's the floor? And all these details start to come up. And you look at the budget you have to work with, and then yeah, you do absolutely look at it from a completely different point of view. But for me, that doesn't happen until the script is locked and there's no more notes on it and everybody's happy with it and people have it. And then it's like, okay, now I got to translate these pages onto the screen, and how do you do it? And suddenly it's like your mind does change and you're looking at the script in a completely different way.
And in terms of like moving from shorts to caveat, did much change? Like, I mean, shorts, they're not as sustained. They're like, what had to shift in you as a director, or was it just a very natural next step, or was it something you were always sort of working towards in the background?
I was always, I mean, you can't make a living from short films. So I just really wanted to make feature films because I thought, well, if I could get a feature film made and if somebody found something good in it, maybe they'd trust me then they trust me with a smaller budget or a budget, and I could work my way up like that. Um, I had a lot to learn on Caveat. I mean, it's a film I'd love to remake in some ways, or I wish I had those ideas now because now I know what to do with them, having made the film. And Caveat's a very strange movie because I think it just every mistake I could make making that film, I made it. Like budget and lack of resources aside, even just the script. Scenes went on for way too long. A scene could be 8 pages of dialogue, and I kept finding in the editing, because I'd edit the film myself. It was like, well, you'd find that halfway through the scene, we're done. all the information that we need has been gotten across. I'm out. Um, the kind of the flow and the pacing and all these kind of things. So I think on my short films, they taught me how to craft a scare, like how to scare an audience, because I'd been to enough film festivals with my shorts to see, what works and what doesn't. Um, so I think with the horror element of Caveat, it worked great. You put people on edge. There's a great atmosphere to that. In terms of the plotting and the pacing, that's definitely where I didn't. I mean, the film did fine, but it's still, when I look at it, I guess I'm always going to be a critic myself of things I make. It's just I can see that a feature film is a very different thing to a short film. This there's a whole structure that I was missing, and I don't think I actually learned any of that stuff until I got to the edit and you went, "Oh man, like I'm in trouble here." That script needed a lot more work, and of course, you know, the reason that script happened so fast as well because this tiny amount of money appeared for us to make it. So it was like, well, it has to be made now. So it was this mad dash to it was a mad like 2-3 month dash to try to get this thing written. And I've definitely learned now with the with 3 or 4 scripts that I'm working on at the moment that you need to write something and then just leave it there, leave it alone for as long as you possibly can.
That was actually my question, is how on earth do you get, because it sounds like you get quite far down the writing track before you bring other people in. But like one of the
Yeah.
things that I particularly find so difficult is you write the thing and then you're so close to it, you can't see it. Like you can't see the thing that
Oh
doesn't make
yeah.
sense.
No.
And like I'll ship it off to people and get it back. But I was like, even when they give you notes, you still can't see it. Like
Yeah.
until
Oh yeah.
you have that. So I was like, how do you get, like it's easy to get to, not it's easy, but it's like you can get to a point, but I to get to that next point is really hard.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
so
Yeah.
you'd leave them go fallow for a while and
As long as it possibly can, because and it's the same with the edit. Um, it's like we did a test screening on Oddity, for example, and you were like, I think the film's working. I think the film's okay. Let's put it in front of a test audience just to see if we're on any kind of a right track. You can be looking at the film for a year and go, I get it. I know what the film's about. The minute you sit down and watch it with an audience or even show it to one other person, the film changes. It's the whatever happens, it's the weirdest thing. And I know that filmmaker, Adam Sandberg, he did Lights Out and a bunch of horror films and Shazam and things like this. He says this as well. He talks about there's just something about even giving somebody a script to read that you'll say, this script is perfect. I've been writing this thing for years. The minute you hit send, it's like something will unlock in your brain and be like, going, I shouldn't have sent it because that scene needed more work. Or it's this strange thing where now that once it's left you, now you can kind of see the problems with it because it's out of your hands and you're much more, I guess, aware of its flaws. And I would definitely find that.
God, it is. There's something about that creative process, yeah, where
Yeah.
you do just get like stuck in a groove. And you mentioned there about the editing and the pacing because it's so important, especially for horror. Talk to me
Yeah.
about what finding those beats are and what's your process of working with an editor?
Well, I edited this with Brian Philip Davis, and he's brilliant editor. I want to work with him on everything from now on. Such a big horror fan and a really good problem solver as well. Just with maybe things that aren't cutting together or they're not as scary as you thought they would be. Um, it's really the way we were kind of working is knowing where we were going. So we knew we'd end up what the reveal would be, what the jump scare, or what the final, the gag would be at the end of the scare. And then it's just trying to find a way to drag out the tension until you get to that release. So that almost feel like, okay, the release is fine. Like, that's almost easy to do. Like you could just randomly put that in the film and it'll scare somebody. Well, it'll startle somebody, but it won't scare them. Whereas it's almost trying to those beats of horror is trying to prolong that tension and get somebody wound up until you get to that final release. So that's where a lot of the work is. But I do a lot of that in storyboarding anyway, just trying to sit with those, roughly drawn panels and just looking at it and going, kind of trying to watch the film in your head or listening to, creepy music or whatever kind of soundtrack it's going to be and just figuring out how to draw, how is that suspense being built with the camera and the performance or whatever it's going to be. And I usually find anyway that if I'm working on it and if it's not scaring me, it's not going to work because I think a huge mistake anybody could make will be whether it's comedy or horror or anything is to say like, this is really going to scare an audience. it's never going to work. It has to scare you first, because if it's not getting any kind of a, if it's not making you laugh, or if it's not making yourself laugh, or if it's not scaring you, like if I'm here at night writing and if I'm not looking over my shoulder, I'm doing something wrong. Whereas if I'm sitting here going like, oh yeah, an audience, whoever they are, they'll find this scary. I don't, but somebody else will. It's like no, nobody else will. It's like that thing, the personal is universal.
Completely. And the sound mix as well for something like this is
Yeah.
just as, it's nearly as important as the edit in terms of like that, like less information is more, and finding out how do you navigate that? Like, is that something where you have a strong idea going into it? Is it something that you like feel into it with the sound designer, or would you have very strong ideas? And then how does music fit on top of that?
Yeah, so even when I'm writing the script, I'd be trying to listen to the sound. I'd find sound effects online and try to, if it's a stormy night or there's wind whistling through the house, I try to have that playing almost to get the idea. I would have done all my sound design on my short films, and I would have done sound design in Caveat. And just as a horror fan, I just think that I always say that like if a film isn't scary, if you turn off the sound, it's not scary anymore. It doesn't matter what the visuals are doing. Whereas what's worse is if you cover your eyes, you can still hear it. So now what you're imagining is so much worse. So when we got into the sound design with Oddity, I knew that there'd be a lot of silence weaponized. I knew there'd be long stretches where you don't really hear a whole lot. I knew timber was always going to be a thing because the wooden man, you never know if is that the house settling or is that the wooden man moving off camera. Um, and then just all the kind of classic tropes of like, building up to unusual stings and to have this kind of always a low atmosphere underneath the whole thing, which I think has a kind of an effect on people on some level where they don't know why they're feeling unsettled. But I worked with Asa Hand up in Dublin. Asa's brilliant. And Asa bounces between a lot of different genres, not just horror, but he had a really good grasp of horror and loads of these unusual ideas to put this kind of stuff in. And then with score, I've always worked with a composer in England, Richard Mitchell, and Richard's very experimental, and there's kind of a fine line some ways between like sound design and what Richard's doing, because he's always keeping that horror in mind, and horror and emotion is very much what we're always talking about every time we get together to work on the score. Yeah, and it's just finding a way to bring the two together. I mean, you'll find that sometimes it's a sound design that does all the heavy lifting, but sometimes it's the score. It's like, okay, well, you might say to Asa, who's doing sound design, well, in this, we're going to hang back because this definitely feels like it should be more score. Whereas with Richard, he'd be like, you can kind of keep this low now because this is absolutely going to be more disturbing kind of sound effects. That's just finding that balance, I guess.
And in terms of then watching it and getting it out in the world, once the post is done, once everything is sort of finished, like it does seem that horror fans are sort of like they're loyal, but they know their stuff and you can't get anything over on them. Talk to me about what it's like touring specifically with a film like this and getting it out to festivals and then, being in that community.
So in terms of, I guess that this film in particular, well, it's like that thing when myself and Brian, the editor, when we finished the film, we said, well, it scares us. This is good. We were laughing, watching and going, yeah, this is good. So once you get it in front of a horror community, like the first time we saw the film was at South by Southwest in Texas. We have no idea. You think, I hope it plays well. We were just delighted to be there and that the film got in. But then when you see the audience getting nervous and you see them starting to, that kind of nervous laughter starting, and they clearly have seen horror films before, so they know what we're up to at times. They say, okay, there's a jump scare coming here, or it's gotten very quiet, something's going to happen. But because we're such horror fans, we try to imagine, well, that's probably what they're thinking, so we'll try to do the opposite in some ways. Like if they think it's coming from the right, we'll bring it from the left. Just little things like this. Yeah, but once it goes into I don't think anybody's as passionate for a horror audience is just incredibly they're very obsessive with horror films. They want to talk about it a lot and break it down, and I guess a film like this, because not everything is explained, there is that there's stuff to discuss with the film.
Oh, that like, and it sounds very rewarding as well.
Yeah.
And what would be like in your mind, what is the perfect film or the closest to perfect that you now see that you'd be like, oh, I'd love to have made that, or maybe it isn't your style, but it is just like
Yeah.
a piece of a work of art?
It's probably four. Well, I mean, there's loads. I mean, I could ask you. I mean, you probably come back with 10 as well. I think John Carpenter's The Thing, Back to the Future, The Iron Giant, Evil Dead 2, the Tarsum's, The Fall. I think those five are always the five that come back to you and you go like, yeah, those. I mean, there's hundreds obviously, but those five, I think, if you only made one film, like if you only got to ever make one film, and it's like, wow, they made that. That's amazing. That's absolutely part of everybody's collection forever. Yeah, that's those ones, you know. But then it's funny because I wonder, like when I hear these filmmakers talking about those films, all they point, if you're the DVD commentary or whatever they'll do, all they really do is talk about the things that they'd like to have done, or the things that they feel that they failed at. You know, like Robert Zemeckis giving out about a camera move that wasn't as good as he wanted it to be, or you know, John Carpenter saying something about it didn't, I don't know, the scene didn't come together the way he wished it did. I don't know. So maybe as filmmakers, you'll never feel 100% happy with the films you make yourself. I don't know.
I suppose, yeah, everything is, you do see all the technical things wrong. Like the editing is the last point you leave it at. And like really at that stage, like the last bit of it, you're like trying to fix stuff. You just abandon it. Um,
Oh yeah,
and you
yeah,
you're talking about your like up you have your next couple of films planned. In
yeah.
terms of like financing them. Like, and I
Hmm.
know sometimes it's like, oh, the magic money fairies come, or they don't come, or they come too late, or they pick the one you're not expecting. Or
Yeah.
are you like, do you have a couple of things in play and you want to do them in this order? Or is it like, no, I'm all my what is it, all my chips are on this number of
Yeah. So I guess there's kind of there's three scripts. One is we're shooting in the next 6 months, and then the next thing after that is written. So we're just starting to talk about that now. So yeah, it's I write all the time, and I think even I feel like I'm starting. I mean, I'm 43 now, so I kind of feel like I'm starting my career quite late. You know, that it's like I'd like to have been making feature films in my 30s, but my whole 30s was spent just trying to get Caveat made and trying to get my foot in the door as such. So it's like, but I've been writing things since I've been 15. So it feels like there's just a stack of scripts on the table now that I can very easily now just move from one to the next. And luckily Oddity has opened that door now, that people are, interested in what I'm doing, or they're asking me to read things as opposed to me sending things for people to read and getting those rejection letters to say, good luck with the project, and they haven't even read the script. So yeah, it kind of goes from a feast or famine, I guess, but luckily at the moment yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a busy couple of years.
Yeah, there's some great sort of like longer form horrors now. Like it's so difficult to sustain horror, I think, for a series, but like House on Haunted Hill did it very well. Like even like the element of Black Mirror where they had the like, I know it isn't horror, but there is that thriller element to it, but like that they create like it's the anthology-ness of it, and then like the artifact museum even at the end
Yeah.
of that, like they do create the worlds in that way, and it does lend itself to that. Would you ever like go into longer form work? Would you ever like be tempted to, if Netflix said, "Oh, you can do what you want. Here's a lot of money."
I'd make films.
You still make
I'd
films.
love films. I just want to make. I have so many ideas. I just want to make these standalone, different types of, and I think I'll probably always stay in horror in some form or other. But like I'd like to, there's stuff I'd like to try with science fiction and historical fiction and just fantasy and all this kind of stuff. But it's yeah, it's very much just kind of never say never. Who knows, if there was something I was really passionate about and said, yeah, I'd have a good take on that. I'd know how to do that. Then yeah, certainly I would try to get it made. But I just think every film takes so much work, and just it kind of feels like it's at least a 2-year commitment for everything to get it done,
Yeah.
that you can be super like passionate and really excited about what you're doing. And I think that's one of the things, even with the script, is once you get into the film or get into storyboarding and get into even just the real problem solving that comes with filmmaking, you're always trying to hang on to that initial idea that you had, and that excitement, go like, oh, that's a really good idea. I should write that down. I think that could make a good film. Even like when you're making like Oddity, it was like when I first wrote out that bullet point page, you kind of read it and go like, oh, that's really good. And you'd be excited about it for a few weeks. And, you're kind of telling anybody, your friends, and telling anybody that'll listen. It's like, I have this idea for a film. They're like, oh yeah. And you start boring them to tears. But you're trying to hang on to that, that passion that you had the whole way through. So I guess if you're doing a TV show, you'd want to be, it's even longer. It's even a bigger commitment. So I guess you'd have to, really love it.
Your characters are so strong. That's the thing that would make me think that there's definitely, like, I'd watch that. Like, I would watch all of those. Like, you're two females, actually. You're two female leads. I really enjoyed them. That, like, the pharmaceutical salesperson and Carolyn. Like, I just really enjoyed, like, their energy, how they were on screen, everything about them. And I'm like, I don't know. I think there's like, that's the thing. It's you build the world around the sustainable of, like who are they and what do they want? And I'm like, I would watch the shit out of them anyway at any day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think I even said it to them too, because my favorite scene in Oddity is the two of them talking back and forth across the table. There's no horror in it, but the conversation just feels very loaded. But it was just the way that the two of them, Carolyn and Caroline, the way they played off each other that day was great. And we were under a little bit of time pressure that day for whatever reason, but they were really good with each other too. They were very supportive. They knew, like, we were turning the camera around and getting bits and pieces. It was really, I really enjoyed that day. And I love watching that scene now, just to see the two of them just going at it. So yeah.
You were great characters. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, enjoyed it.
And thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this discussion, please like, review and subscribe to the Film Ireland podcast on your platform of choice. And to stay on top of upcoming news, events and discussions, visit filmireland.ie, where you can sign up to our newsletter.